All right, we are now recording. Welcome everybody. We've got about 35 attendees or participants right now on the call. And that includes some panelists here. Myself, I'm Tom Engels. I'm a consultant with the company Horizon Water and Environment. And my company is under contract with the California Public Utilities Commission, and Rob Peterson is the project manager at the CPUC, and he's my client. And so Rob is also going to be presenting some of the slides as we go forward here. I just want to let everyone know that this is sort of a new thing we're doing because of COVID. We would normally give a presentation like this in person down in Paso. Some of you may have attended our scoping meeting a couple of years ago for this project that we held down in the school down in Paso. But we're having to innovate here a little bit with a Zoom call, and we'll go through kind of the way that this is going to work in the first few slides. And hopefully this will all work out. And if it doesn't, I apologize. We're going to have another meeting at 5:30 today. So we're going to have two of these public meetings. So this presentation is about the Draft Environmental Impact Report, or as I'll be calling it, an EIR, that was released on December 8th for the proposed Estrella Substation and Paso Robles area reinforcement project. This project is being proposed jointly by Horizon West Transmission and also by Pacific Gas and Electric Company. So thanks everybody for taking part in this presentation, and we'll go ahead and get started with the actual presentation here. Just some logistical features first. This is a Zoom call, and there are some features that we have. Some have already been using. You'll see, and I believe it should be in the bottom of your screen. It may vary depending on what type of device you're using and the setup that you have. But there are features called chat, raise hand, and Q&A. The chat button is disabled during this presentation. Instead, what we're going to do is rely on the Q&A button, just so that we can have everybody commenting using the same button and the same window. And so you can click on this to ask questions to the panelists. And if we have time at the end, we're going to do the best that we can to read the questions aloud and provide a response. There's also a raise hand feature. And this graphic down at the bottom of the screen is intended to, this is what it should look like on your device, but like you would click raise hand. And this is what you would do if you wanted to speak at the end of the presentation. So our meeting agenda, we're going to talk about format. We've already talked a little bit about that. And then we're going to talk about the purpose and goals of the meeting, the roles of the speakers. And Rob is going to talk a little bit about the CPUC process that gets engaged for projects such as this. And then we're going to talk about the California Environmental Quality Act, or Sequa. And that's why we're all here today. Sequa is what makes it a requirement to prepare a document such as what was just submitted for public review, the Draft Environmental Impact Report. We'll talk about the proposed project, and then talk about the alternatives. There are alternatives that were reviewed in the draft EIR. These are basically alternative projects. Alternative ways of potentially meeting the objectives of the project. And then we'll talk a little bit about the environmental analysis. And then at the end, which is really important, is how to submit written comments on the draft EIR. And because of this format that we're using with Zoom, we're really going to encourage everybody, if you have comments on the draft EIR, we'd like you to submit them in writing, and we'll tell you at the end of the presentation how to do that. And that way we can respond to those comments in writing in the final EIR. So again, this is a Zoom call. It is being recorded. And right now, the presentation slides that I'm going through for this meeting, they are available on the project website right now. If you go to the website, you may have to hit refresh to have it update to today's update. You'll know it's updated if it gives December 15th as the date of the last update. So it'll contain all the slides that we're covering today. The presenters is Rob Peterson from the CPUC, the project manager for this project, and then myself. I'm Tom Engels. I'm with Horizon Water and Environment, and I just want to make it clear that my company is not in any way affiliated with Horizon West Transmission, which is one of the applicants for this project. Horizon West Transmission is a utility company or an energy company. I'm with an environmental consulting firm. All attendees are muted during the presentation. At the end, if you've raised your hand and would like to speak, and if time permits, I'll ask individuals, I'll call on you and ask to unmute yourself and give you hopefully 2 minutes, depending on how many people want to speak at the end. And then again, if you have a question, use the Q&A button, and at the end we'll review any questions that people have typed in to the Q&A box. So again, time permitting, we're hoping that we can give speakers up to 2 minutes to speak. And again, I just want to remind everybody that this entire meeting is being recorded, and we will be uploading these recordings. We're going to try to do our best to get these available for people who aren't able to attend, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I just want to reiterate that this meeting is being recorded. So the purpose of this meeting is really to provide everyone with an overview of the proposed project and the draft EIR. So the draft EIR, as some of you may have already looked and taken a look at, which is available on the project website, is a long document, and we understand that. So we want to give an opportunity in this setting for informal questions that you may have about the document. And again, the written comments should be submitted to Estrella Project at horizonh2o.com. And we'll talk about that at the end of the presentation, but I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of the email address to submit comments to. And so, hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll all know about the project purpose, how we evaluated it in the Sequa document, and the environmental impact analysis, issues of concern, and that you all know how to submit written comments on the draft EIR. I'm going to turn this over now to Rob Peterson to talk about the respective roles of the different entities here involved in this project. So Rob, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thanks, Tom. Wish we could liven up the presentation a bit today. It's going to be, hope it's not too long and we have plenty of time for comments. So just quickly, one of the misconceptions we commonly hear about when we have meetings in the public is there's a misconception about who's building the project and who's reviewing and approving the project. So the applicants, Horizon West and a NextEra company and Pacific Gas and Electric Company, they would construct and operate the project or an alternative if approved. And whereas the role of the Public Utilities Commission, with me as a project manager and Horizon as a consultant, is to review the project. And ultimately, the commission would either approve or deny the project or some version of it. So not constructing the project, but reviewing it. Go to next slide there, Tom. So the process is, for an electric project of this nature, the investor-owned utilities, which would be Horizon and PG&E, submit an application pursuant to our General Order 131D. The type of application in this case is a permit to construct application. That number for the application is important to have handy if you go looking for that formal proceeding website where the application is filed. That's A1701023. The 17 refers to the year of filing. In this case, it was January 2017. In addition to the application materials, there is a proponent's environmental assessment filed. I'll be referred to it as the PEA. And there's a process of reviewing the PEA filing, which is the applicant's take on the potential impacts of the project and also a project description. And there's a process of data responses. And in this case, there was a revised PEA filed during that review process. There are two tracks of CPUC review. One is the environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act. That's a staff-led process at the Public Utilities Commission. And that's the purpose of this meeting today as part of the Sequa review process. There's also a formal proceeding in a courtroom with the judge, one of the 5 commissioners, the assigned office, we refer to that as, presides over that proceeding. And again, the CPUC has the authority to either approve or deny the application. So I don't know if Tom will be able to zoom in at all on this. I know it's a bit small. Again, we'll give you the project website as part of this presentation, and you'll be able to go to and download these slides. But just it's another way of saying we have 2 processes of review at the commission, and there's a bit of timeline material here as well. So in January 2017, you can see up in the middle, there was an application filed. And upon filing, it breaks it into, there are 2 review processes. One is the formal proceeding, which is peach colored arrow on the right side. And the other is the environmental review part, which is the green arrow pointing down on the left. So you can see one of the bubbles on the environmental review is highlighted. So that's where we are right now in our review. We've circulated the draft EIR and are seeking comments on it. That it was circulated on December 8th. This year, and the comment review period ends on February 1st next year. And upon getting those comments, we will make edits as needed to the draft EIR, record those comments into the final EIR, and then issue that back so that the administrative law judge can write up what we call a proposed decision. So skipping back over to the right-hand side of this figure, the formal proceeding hasn't really kicked off yet. The application was docketed. We know there are some parties to the proceeding at this point, but the judge decided to hold the pre-hearing conference after the draft environmental impact report was circulated. So we've met that date, and it's reasonable to expect the formal proceeding will start with a pre-hearing conference sometime next year. And once it does, those can take a year or longer to conclude. Once it does conclude, it will conclude with a proposed decision, which takes into account all the information on the record from that formal proceeding process in the courtroom setting, and the environmental review pieces that we provide in our environmental impact report. There's a chance for comments on that proposed decision. And then finally, the 5 commissioners vote. And it becomes a final decision once voted out, and our EIR would be certified at the same point. So I know it's commonly asked, well, when would construction start if approved? And there's a lot of variables, but I want to try to answer that as best I can as of today. So if the formal proceeding were to start, let's say, early in spring next year, and it were to take at least a year for a decision to come out, it's possible at the earliest, construction, if approved, could start in 2022. But it's hard to pinpoint that date because it's hard to know how long the formal proceeding may take. Once construction does start, it will take 18 months or longer to build the proposed project or an alternative. So 2024 is an estimate that PG&E has made as a possible operational date. But again, there's a lot of variables. And I think the takeaway here is that the soonest construction could start is sometime in 2022. All right, next slide, Tom. Thanks.
Yep. I'm, for some reason, whoa. All right.
There you go.
Sorry.
Probably the roller on your mouse, as opposed to like another possibility of clicking forward. Oh, I guess it's back to you, Tom. So Sequa.
It is back to me. So just a little background on Sequa, California Environmental Quality Act. Really, the whole point of Sequa is disclosure. It's all about telling the public, other agencies, decision makers, anybody who's interested in what is the proposed project, what are the environmental impacts of the proposed project, what are possible alternatives to the proposed project, and if there is if there are environmental impacts of the proposed project or alternatives to the proposed project, what are those impacts? Can they be avoided altogether or mitigated? In other words, reduce the impacts, be lessened with what we call mitigation measures. And so there's different ways Sequa allows for environmental impacts to be either avoided altogether or minimized. One is through mitigation measures. Another is just alternatives. There may be a completely different way of achieving most of the project objectives that are completely different than what is being proposed. And so we'll be talking a lot about some of these alternatives that we looked at. We looked at quite a few, many more than you would typically see in an environmental impact report. But we wanted to really look at this, really do a good job of not only evaluating the impacts of the proposed project, but identifying if there are alternative ways of meeting the project objectives. And so, and in the end, there will be disclosure of why the CPUC, in this case, the commission, approved the project or chose an alternative to the project, and so forth. So that's really the whole point of Sequa. And I've mentioned project objectives quite a bit already. These are the project objectives as described in the draft EIR. So it's really important to understand that there are two primary objectives. One is at what we call the transmission objective. The other is the distribution objective. And I want to just, there are a lot of terms on this slide. We're going to explain these terms and these objectives in less complex language here as we go forward. But just to start out, when you think of a transmission line, those are more of the high voltage lines out in the world. They're technically, above 50 kilovolts, kV. Whereas the distribution lines, those are the lower voltage lines that actually, feed to different end users. So we have a transmission objective and a distribution objective. The distribution, what I want to talk about a little bit with the transmission objective is in this slide. So I want to just sort of explain all of the complicated language that is in this first objective using this figure. So this is what exists out in Paso and the greater Paso area right now. There are two lines that are kind of a purple, a lavender and a pink that go here from towards the northeast. And one of them is a 500 kV transmission line, so that's very high voltage. And then next to it is a 230 kV transmission line. And the 230 kV is really what we're trying to tap into here. We're tapped into it down at Templeton, the Templeton Substation, which is just south of Paso. Then there's the Paso Robles Substation. This one's pretty much in the downtown area. You may have seen it. It's pretty much surrounded on all sides by urban development, but it's there. And there's the substation there. There's also a substation that goes to the north off of this map. That's the San Miguel substation. So when we're talking about this first objective of the transmission objective, it's really to address an issue that exists right now with the grid, the transmission grid. And that is, in the event that there is a failure of the what's called transformer number 1 bank here at Templeton substation here south of town, or if this line right here, this transmission line, the 70 kV line right here between Templeton and Paso, if something were to happen to this line, let's say a pole got hit by a car or something and the line came down. So either one of those scenarios where something happens to this line or the transformer bank here gets damaged, that creates a potential outage up in the northern part of this map. And so the purpose of this project is really to increase the reliability of the grid up in this area. And so there are various different ways, including the proposed project, to increase the reliability for people, residents and businesses and everybody that relies on electricity up in this area.
Tom, I just want to add a point here. And so we'll get into this a little bit later, but we did look really hard at alternatives such as battery storage, alternatives to meet the distribution objective or alternatives to meet the transmission objective. We found that it was feasible to meet the alternative, the distribution objective with battery storage. But the challenge with meeting the transmission objective with battery storage is really the capacity of the 70 kV line from the north, from San Miguel. So if power, if the line to the south, the Templeton, were to go out, or at Templeton substation, and it was a peak summer day or week, where it's very hot, lots of air conditioners running, there would not be enough capacity left over from San Miguel, as Tom explained. There also would not be enough capacity at night. And that's critical because if we were to use a battery storage alternative, it would need to recharge if the battery was used during the day. And if the outage lasted multiple days and the battery couldn't recharge, then you'd have a situation where you would lose power in Paso. And so the battery storage solution at the 70 kV level, we didn't carry forward for full analysis ultimately and found it to be infeasible.
All right. So let's talk about the draft DIR. It's a long document, not including appendices, just the executive summary and the 8 chapters is approximately 1,000 pages. It's all available on the project website, but I just wanted to give an overview that the draft DIR consists of an executive summary and then 8 sections, starting with the introduction, the project description, which is what it is that the applicants, PG&E and Horizon West Transmission, what they're proposing. And then chapter 3 is a description of all of the alternatives that were evaluated in the draft DIR. And then chapter 4 is a big one. It's the environmental impact analysis. And this is not only the impact analysis on the proposed project, but also of all of the alternatives. And then we have an alternative summary chapter. This is chapter 5, is a nice chapter that kind of it comes up with the conclusion, based on everything in chapters 2, 3, and 4, what are some of the take-home points from an environmental impact analysis standpoint? And when we start looking at, so which of these alternatives, including, and let's just include the proposed project, if we lay out all of these different alternatives and the proposed project and the no project, doing nothing, which ones rank better from an environmental standpoint? In other words, which alternatives have lower or lesser impacts to the environment as compared to the others? Then we have a chapter 6, which talks about some requirements that go with Sequa, as well as cumulative impacts analysis. And then we have report preparers, the references, and the appendices. So this is what all of this is available on the project website. And you can download the whole body of the draft EIR as a single file minus the appendices, or you can download each individual section, including each individual section of Chapter 4, which again is the environmental impact section. And that's broken up into 20 different sections, starting with aesthetics and ending with wildfire. So in each of these sections, we talk about what are the environmental impacts of the proposed project and all of the alternatives to, let's say, visual resources in aesthetics, or what are the air quality impacts? What are the impacts to with respect to noise or wildfire? So you can go to each of these individual sections and see what the conclusions were with the environmental impact analysis that we did. So let's talk about the proposed project. This is what is proposed by Horizon West Transmission and PG&E. And that is, it's really, you can think of it as three main components. One is the substation, and that we're calling the Estrella Substation. This would be a new substation that would be, as you can see, it's right along this 500 kV, 230 kV line. And then, and this is right on Union Road, by the way. And would be if it was built, would be along Union Road. And then the power line, goes here. This is the blue. And then once we get to the existing 70 kV line, there's some, what we call reconductoring, essentially what that, and some pole replacement. Essentially what this is sort of upgrading the quality of the lines here. It's one way of thinking about it. And there are some poles along here that need to be replaced, but that's this line. So this is if you go out, this line exists right now. The proposed project would just simply sort of upgrade this segment right here. And just to give you context, so this is the airport up here. This is downtown Paso right here. And this is Route 56, Highway 101 going down here. So this is the proposed project. So you can kind of break up the proposed project components into the substation components. And again, I'm just going to go back. That's this over here, this substation right here that would be built if the project was approved. And it's right along Union Road. So you have the substation components, which is a new 230 kV, 70 kV substation. It's about a 15-acre site. And then you also have some transmission line interconnections to the existing 230. Again, going back here, one of these lines is the 230. So you're connecting to that 230 kV line. Then you have the power line components. And as already explained in the previous slide, it's sort of, there's 7 miles of new line, a new power line that would connect the substation to the existing Paso Robles line. So that's this aqua colored line right here. This is about 7 miles of new line. There's no line there right now. So new line, and then it would connect up to the existing 70 kV. And then we would have some reconductoring or replacing of approximately 3 miles of the existing, what we call the San Miguel Paso Robles 70 kV power line. There's another part of this project, and those are what the applicants, and again, when I say applicants, I mean Horizon West Transmission and PG&E, what they are not proposing right now, but see as either reasonably foreseeable components that are things that aspects that they might build down the road a few years versus ultimate substation build out, which may or may not happen. When it does, we're not really sure. It's sometime way down the road where the the proposed Estrella substation would be completely built out. What would the ultimate build out of the Estrella substation look like? Well, this is the proposed site of the Estrella substation. Here's Union Road. What is in black, you see it here, you see it here, you see some lines. You see black here. These are black parts of the substation. Those are what would be built immediately. What's in blue are the future distribution components. So you can seem to have lost my cursor. There it is. Blue is right there, and here, and here. Those are future components. Some are above ground, some are below ground, or would be. And then what's in green are what we're calling sort of this ultimate build out, this somewhat speculative, not sure if, when, how, where, when it would be built, but it would be built sometime, potentially way down the road, years from now. So this would be the whole ultimate substation build out. This is a visual simulation.
Could you go back just for 1 second to the prior slide? I just want to add a few points. So just one thing to note, I'm going to try to draw there. Horizon West Transmission is the applicant. And so their prior name used the acronym NEAT West. And we may have even had a prior logo on a prior slide. And as I apologize to the applicants if that's the case, but Horizon West. And I want to add that the distribution alternative that includes battery storage or another type of distributed energy resource, what it would avoid building or defer building specifically is this blue infrastructure here and here. And so those pieces of infrastructure, a bus that steps down the power from 70 kV to 21 kV, a distribution level, is tens of millions of dollars. And it's possible that if the need for those facilities materializes, the need could be met with a different type of facility. And that's what our EIR looks at. The other items in green inside the substation here, those are future speculative items that could be built if needed. And it's possible those needs could be met with distributed energy resources in the future as well. But for our analysis, we focused on these items in blue and finding a way to, an alternative way of building those, of meeting that need. And finally, when we started this journey in 2017, the need was within the 10-year planning horizon for these distribution components. As of this year, the need has changed. And so it is not clear that those distribution components will be needed pursuant to the current forecast for 5 to 15 years. So quite some time before that need would materialize. I also want to note we wanted to try to be technology neutral in our look at possible distributed energy resources. So in addition to lithium ion batteries, we looked at something called a flow battery. A flow battery would be something like you have 2 tanks of chemicals, and as the liquids transfer between the tanks, in one direction, energy is released, in the other, it's stored. And if this need were to occur in 5 or 10 years, technologies will advance. And so there could be some combination of, say, energy efficiency or solar or storage. Some of it could be aggregated at folks' houses or commercial sites, or some of it could be what we call front of the meter, which would be more of a utility type siting of distributed energy resources. So we looked at these things and we're excited to share some of that with you today. And I'll turn it back over to Tom.
Great. So if you're wondering what would this Estrella substation look like, this is an artist's rendering, a simulation of what the substation would look like. This is, we're standing on Union Road, and this is the artist's rendering of the new substation. So looking at the impact analysis of the proposed project, there are quite a few impacts Many can be reduced to what we call a less than significant level with mitigation measures. But there are some that are what we call significant and unavoidable impacts. What that means is even with mitigation, the impact is still significant and unavoidable. And those pertain to aesthetics. Those are aesthetic impacts from the substation itself and the power lines. Agricultural resources, this is mainly the loss of prime farmland due to the placement of new poles, as well as the loss of prime farmland at the substation site. The air quality, there's just going to be air quality emissions that are associated with the actual construction of the proposed project that go above a certain threshold established by the Air Board for determining significance, and then noise. And the noise, a lot of this noise is due to helicopter noise for the installation of the pole, some of the poles. This is a very busy slide. We wanted to include it though, because it does contain a lot of useful information so that when after this presentation and you have these slides, you can take this slide and use it to help understand a lot of the slides that are coming in the future parts of this presentation. We have the proposed project, and that's right here. So it's using using the aqua color for the substation, the 70 kV line. There's a variation to the 70 kV line up in near the Germain, Wisteria, Golden Hill Road area that we'll talk about. Actually, no, this is the modification due to, I believe, a biological resource. We have some the reasonably foreseeable components here, anything that the existing substations. And then this middle column are all of the alternatives that were carried forward for full analysis in the EIR. One thing I want to make sure that is clear is that these are not standalone alternatives. These need to be paired, or we need to combine them with some of the other alternatives to make a complete solution to both project objectives that we talked about earlier in the presentation. So one thing I want to make sure is clear is that, not one particular alternative here solves every aspect of the project. There are other alternatives which we looked at, but we dismissed for various reasons. Those are all colored in black. So we analyzed all of the alternatives. They're analyzed along with the proposed project in Chapter 4. So if you're interested in looking at particular environmental impacts of a given alternative with respect to noise or aesthetics or whatever the resource topic is, you just go to that section and look for the impact analysis of that alternative. And as I said, many of these alternatives only address one aspect of the proposed project or project objectives, so they need to be combined with another alternative. So you, for example, need the substation and the power line. But then there are many other combinations that we'll talk about in a little bit. And we actually look at these combinations in Chapter 5 of the draft EIR. So if you want to see kind of the whole pack, what are the complete packages that would solve most of the problems that are identified that this proposed project is trying to address, those are described in Chapter 5. So here is a map. We're going to zoom in the next few slides to the north and the south, because there's a lot of information on this map, but I think it's useful to just show kind of the big picture of all of these. This map shows all of the combinations, including expansion of the Templeton substation and the South River Road route, which was here, and cuts across land here and then follows South River Road up to eventually getting to the Paso Robles substation. We've already talked about the proposed project. Here's the blue, the substation, and there's a little alignment there, another variation here. This line going up here. We've got some alternatives here that we looked at, which are underground alternatives. So again, this is just to give you an idea of where this is. Up in the Wisteria, Germain, what are some of the other, Golden Hill Road area. We've looked at some underground where we put the power line underground. We've looked at those possibilities. There's reconductoring here for the proposed project. Another alternative that we're going to talk about more in this presentation is, we've called it the North Route alternative, the Estrella route. This is basically this right here, over here, the combination number 2, which is the Estrella route, which could or could not include the building of a new substation up here in Bunnell Ranch, or relying on the proposed Estrella substation. So we could either, the substation could be built here and you have a line that, essentially makes its way up here and goes west and comes back down. And there are different variations here with the alignment that I'm not going to get into right now. But these black lines, again, are dismissed alternatives. So we've got a lot of different things going on here. All of these alternatives, by the way, these combinations include battery storage. So, I put it here in alternative combination number 5. The only reason why I put with distributed energy resources, which means essentially battery storage type solutions, is to just distinguish it from this alternative up here that has undergrounding. So let's zoom in to the north. So all I've done is zoomed into the north part of the previous map. Again, here's the proposed Estrella substation, the power line, and then the reconductoring down to Paso Robles substation. These purple lines, lavender lines here, are some alternatives to the proposed project that basically would underground the lines in this portion of the project area. We could have this Estrella substation built and then go up using various combinations here and go to the far north and then across and then down. You'll see stars sometimes on these figures. These are what are just battery storage facilities. We call these in front of the meter solutions. These are facilities that you would construct that would be essentially battery storage housed facilities. And we looked at some example sites. These are just example sites. These are not being proposed or anything like that, but we just looked at examples. The southern alternative combinations, for the most part, rely on this, what we call the South River Road alternative. This would involve the expansion of the existing Templeton substation, and then this route here that goes along South River Road up to Paso Robles substation. So when we were done with our evaluation of all of the alternatives and the combination of alternatives, we looked at all of them and said, which one would be considered environmentally superior? In other words, has the least environmental impacts or the lowest number of impacts overall? And the answer that we came up with was alternative combination number 2, which is the Estrella route plus the proposed substation. So my cursor is just, there it is. So this alternative involves building the Estrella substation, which is part of the proposed project, but that similarity ends there, because instead of going across here, the line would go up to the north and then cut across and then connect up to the 70 kV line here and then go back down to Paso Robles substation. And again, these stars are just some example sites where you could have battery storage facilities. So this was what we deemed to be the environmentally superior alternative combination. We ranked all of the alternative combinations from 1 to 6, 1 being the environmentally superior, down to 6 being the least desirable from an environmental standpoint, or the one that has the most impacts to the environment. So again, number 1 is the Estrella route, the Estrella substation plus the Estrella route plus battery storage. Battery storage is with all of these except, of course, the proposed project, because the proposed project did not include battery storage. And then it goes down to these other alternative combinations. South Benel Ranch, this is basically constructing a new substation up in the far northeast part of the map that I just showed you, the South River Road. And then we have undergrounding. This alternative combination, number 1, is essentially the proposed project with undergrounding. There are some additional impacts that occur, but it still has less impacts than the proposed project does from an environmental standpoint. So the proposed project ranks number 4. One thing I want to highlight is that I think a lot of you are probably wondering, where are these alternatives, or where is the proposed project with respect to where I live or where I work, or various locations. And what we've done is, and some of you I know are already using this map, is we've put an interactive web map on the project website. And so when you click on that link, you see this map, and you can zoom in with these plus and minus, or using your cursor. I just sort of scroll with my cursor and it can come zoom way in or zoom way out. There are 3 different items up here on the menu bar. The one on the far left, this is just the legend, which over here would just show you what all the colors mean, what they stand, what they stand for. Think back to that slide that I had earlier that had all of the different alternatives and different colors associated with them. If you wanted to look at a particular alternative, you could click on whichever alternative you want to look at, or you can look at them all. The default is everything is shown, or the map type. So this map type right here is what's called imagery with labels. You can just have aerial photography as your base map. If you want to have streets as your base map, you can choose this one instead. There's topographic. There are quite a few different types of maps that you can have as sort of your background to help you understand where you're looking at. You can also type in your address, your actual address of your home or business, and it will zoom in to your home, and you can see it, and you can see where these respective alternative components are with respect to your property. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that.
Tom, I just chatted, I think everybody, the web map location and the project website.
Oh, did I? I'm sorry, I didn't. I should have said that.
Well, that's okay. It's in the chat now. So that's one way they can. It's on the slides, but they can click on those links and find this map you're presenting.
Yeah. So if you go to the project website, so clicking on this screen won't do anything, but this map is available on the project website. So once the public comment period is over, and as Rob indicated, the public comment period is open until February 1st at 5 p.m. Once the public comment period is completed, we will start preparing the final EIR, and that will include responses, well, first of all, it'll include copies of all comments received. So emails or letters, all of that will be put into the final EIR. And we will provide written responses to every comment raised that involves, significant environmental issues. We will provide written responses to comments in the final EIR. And then if applicable, if there are any changes to the draft EIR itself based on comments and responses, we will include those as well in the final EIR. So now we've kind of gotten to the Q&A, open discussion point. And so it is at this point that if you would like to speak, raise your hand and I will call on you and try to answer your question here. So there's something in the Q&A. Rob, did you answer that yet?
Yeah, I just noticed that too. It looks like Jim Spear had a question about underbuilds. And what I think we can say generally, not knowing exactly the location, is that an underbuild is you'll see in a power line high up, the higher voltage part of the line, 70 kV, and a lower voltage part of the line, like a distribution 21 kV line, might be lower on the tower. As part of the underbuild on a tower, you might also see telecommunications cables. So your Comcast line or otherwise might be up on the tower below even the distribution circuit. So you have several levels of wires on an overhead line. And so you have the top and then the underbuild below whatever on the top.
Okay. The pole heights, the proposed pole heights, there's actually not a specific height, but those are discussed in the EIR, yes. So I would refer you to the chapter 2, the project description, or chapter 3, the alternatives chapter, if you want details about pole heights. Where do economics to build enter into the equation? I'm not sure I understand that question. Rob, do you understand that? I'm looking at the Q&A.
Yeah, I think just generally the cost of the project or the impact on adjacent properties, I think those are types of economic impacts. Those aren't part of the environmental review. We have in chapter 5 given some general information about the cost of the project, though it's fairly a rough estimate, and project costs tend to refine over time as the design gets completed. But economics impacts on properties, it's often a question we get during Sequa review, but it's not something we look at under Sequa. Okay,
Stephen Baker has asked he's raised his hand, so I'm gonna allow him to talk because he may, hang on here.
Okay, I'm unmuted, I believe.
You are unmuted.
Thank you,
Hi,
Tom.
Stephen.
Thank you, Rob. Met with you guys a few times before and on discussing these items. On the economics part, let me be clear on that. Because I know this is an EIR and it's such an environmental focus. Obviously, there's shorter routes than the proposed route. And with those shorter routes, the economics would seem that the cost to build would be a primary consideration because it's equally about half of the distance of what the proposed 7-mile route would be. It would also preclude having to conductorize some of the other lines and such. So that there is that one that always has seemed to pop up, at least to us that are located along the proposed route, that seems to be a much more viable route. And that's why, I know economics really isn't in this part of the discussion, but it really needs to be because it kind of is the 1-2 punch. If the environmental can stand it, then what's the cost to build it? And then the other question I just put in is there a reason listed why for each of the alternatives were not selected in the chapters, chapter 5 specifically? Is there a listing of saying why alternate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever wasn't selected?
So I think in terms of why, of course, right now, nothing has been selected. I want to make sure that is everyone understands. Nothing has been selected. This is all just an environmental review period right now. What has been done is that there's been a ranking of alternatives from environmentally superior to least superior. The explanation for why, let's say, the Estrella route came out on top versus another alternative or the proposed project, the explanations for why the rankings fell the way they did, those are in chapter 5 of the draft EIR. So you can go to chapter 5. Towards the end of chapter 5, there's a discussion of why a given alternative ranked the way it ranked in that environmental superiority list.
So Tom, I'll just add too, so the environmental process, when we do an environmental impact report, one way to explain it is we come up with a menu of options. So these alternative combinations are the menu, but as staff, we don't select one or the other or approve or disapprove anything. That occurs in that formal proceeding process I talked about, the peach colored arrow that points down, where it's in a courtroom with the judge in the assigned office, and ultimately there's a decision voted out by all 5 commissioners, and that's where it's determined which route to take. And it may not be the environmentally superior route, and if it isn't, there will be reasons for that that they would disclose in that decision. So at this time, we're just looking at environmental impacts. That's our focus as staff.
So if we look at the Estrella route as opposed to the proposed route, will it say why, because that was the environmentally superior route, why that was disqualified over the proposed route?
Chapter 5 provides that information. I wouldn't say the word disqualified is quite right. It's just a ranking of environmental impacts that comes up to our finding of an environmental superior route, but none of those alternatives are disqualified. In fact, they all made the menu. They made the list. And so when the commission looks at those, it's possible any of them could be selected. They've been evaluated under Sequa.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and mute Stephen. Looking at Warren, you had a comment, Warren from the city of Paso Robles. What are alternative BS2 and BS3 and alternative 2? Okay, so one thing I have to apologize for is the names of these different alternatives get a little complicated. And so what I want to do is go back to BS2. So let me look at your question again. Oh, yeah. So BS2 and BS3, these are battery storage alternatives. So, and again, they're going to be in all of the different alternatives. So, but this is just kind of that battery storage component of alternatives. RP.
So we could say, Tom, so if BS2 is here, battery storage 2, battery storage 1 had to do with the transmission need, whereas battery storage 2 has to do with the distribution, meeting the distribution need. Was that? I think that's right.
I think that's right. I'm not sure if Patrick has anything to.
Yeah, Patrick... and there was a battery storage 3 as well for behind the meter as opposed to front of the meter. But yeah, Patrick, I'll let you take it.
Yeah, I mean, the way you described it is correct. battery storage too is front of the meter battery storage to address the distribution objective. So those are going to be bigger facilities that are, put on an open site. And those are the example sites that we looked at. Those are the stars on the map. And then BS3 is behind the meter, which is, it's more along the lines of the distributed energy resources that Tom and Rob mentioned, but it's things that it's like, for example, any resident could put in a smaller battery storage unit inside their home, or BS3 also includes behind the meter solar, so solar that goes on someone's roof that could charge their battery. And if enough people do that in the Paso Robles area, that reduces the distribution load, and that helps the overall system. And if enough people do it, potentially, reduce the need to expand distribution capacity. So we separated them out just conceptually for the EIR, but essentially they're both battery storage alternatives that would help to address the distribution objective.
Thanks, Patrick. RP also asked, why isn't undergrounding being considered on Buena Vista Drive along the Cal Paso Winery and Loftus Ranch properties? It's a straight line on a flat dirt road. I'm actually not, I don't know where that is off the top of my head. If anybody else does, we can certainly look at that and provide an answer to your question in the final EIR. Again, we'd recommend that if you could just type these questions in an email, that way we'll have a hard copy of it. That would be great. But I don't actually, it's where the proposed, okay, it's where the,
yeah, I could maybe
Patrick, you can
talk about that one. I mean, that basically, the scope of the undergrounding was based on where we identified the significant aesthetic impacts, potential aesthetic impacts along Golden Hill Road. And so we didn't find those along Buena Vista Drive, which is why it didn't extend up that way.
okay. Yes, did you consider the impact from the houses in the area? RP, are you, not sure, do you mean, did we consider the impact of the line on the houses? Not sure. I'm understanding if you, the visual impact on the views from our properties. We'll have to look at this. Again, we'll have to, look at we'll have to get back to you on this in terms of specific questions about your particular property. As far as EMF goes, we under Sequa, the CPUC does not consider EMF to be a Sequa impact, and so we discuss EMF early up in the front part of the document, but we don't actually look at environmental impacts. The literature right now is very undecided about what, if any, impacts there are of EMF, and so because of that, it's not considered in the impact analysis itself. I want to make sure that, I don't know if Rob, you wanted to add to that or?
No, I mean, there's for EMF, we could add that there's a plan that the applicants follow and submit, and it's for low cost, and reasonable measures to reduce EMF. So it's how they space the cables on the tower, how it's built has a big impact on EMFs. But everything else Tom said is exactly right.
Okay, as far as will all these questions and comments be included in the recording? Well, we are still recording, and so what will be recorded is me reading these questions out loud and the answers. Just looking to see, are there any hands raised or? Stephen Baker asks, so the economics of running underground will not be a negative? Well, I mean, the economics, I want to make sure that everyone understands, the environmental impact report itself, we're focused solely on environmental impacts. The whole issue of weighing the economics of the proposed project versus alternatives, those are issues that will be brought up almost certainly during the proceeding and will be subject to consideration by the commission.
But in response, I mean, we could point you to Chapter 5, where we did, for disclosure purposes, include some information about the potential costs of undergrounding and the potential costs of even the longer route. And so there is some useful information for you to consider in Chapter 5. Although the cost information was not part of our environmental analysis, it's a common question, and we did disclose some of that basic information.
We had an anonymous attendee ask, what is the deadline for providing comments? February 1st at 5 p.m. is the deadline for providing comments, and you can go, we gave you the email address for submitting those comments. That email address is also at the project website. Stephen asks, so selecting to run underground as recommended by the EIR could be overruled due to economics at a later date. That's a possibility. Ultimately, this is this EIR. There are no decisions made in this EIR. There are actually no, I don't even want to call them recommendations. They're just statements. These are what the impacts are. The economics of everything is going to be also subject for consideration by the commission. And so the EIR contains the environmental component of this. Jay Dawson asks, if this is an EIR and you determine that the Estrella route is the most superior route environmentally, why is the San Antonio Winery and Golden Hill alignment still being called the proposed project? That's a good question. So what I want to make sure is everyone understands is the respective roles that are of the different parties here. The CPUC does a complete review, a Sequa review and project reviews of projects like this. And, but CPUC is not proposing these projects. They did not propose the proposed project. The proposed project was proposed by Horizon West Transmission and Pacific Gas and Electric. So that proposed project comes before the CPUC, and the CPUC begins an environmental review of the proposed project. The CPUC doesn't dismiss the proposed project. It's still the proposed project because the project is being proposed by not CPUC, but by these two applicants. And so it still is called the proposed project throughout this process, this Sequa process. That doesn't mean it's going to be built. It doesn't mean the commission is going to choose it. It doesn't mean it's not going to be chosen. It's just that's the title it gets because it's been proposed by Horizon West Transmission and PG&E. And where CPUC comes in is with these alternatives, with identifying potential alternatives to what is being proposed by the two project applicants.
It's just a naming convention that will stick through the entire review process to help us keep track of which components of the project or alternative to approve. But so the name won't change over time.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation and all your responses to our question and comments. You're welcome, Stephen. So RP writes, let me sum up. You're planning to run a gigantic power line through a beautiful rural neighborhood in the area of Paso Refinery. Did you consider how this gigantic power line would ruin the views from the surrounding houses and properties? So again, just to, just so that everybody understands, CPUC has written this document, the draft ER. The CPUC did not propose any, it's not proposing this proposed project. It did consider alternatives. As far as considering aesthetic impacts, we did consider the aesthetic impacts, not only of the proposed project, but of all of the alternatives. Those impacts are all described in section 4.1 of the draft EIR. And so, yeah, we did look at the impacts of the proposed project and the alternatives. Anybody raising their hands? No. Jim
Great.
says thanks for your
thank you for the feedback. And if you have other feedback about how to do this better, let us know. We haven't done many Sequa remote presentations or public meetings, so any constructive feedback would be welcome.
But just for the record, I'm going to read out Jim's comment. Thanks for the presentation. I found it very informative and productive. Q&A, okay. Does anybody want to speak? If so, raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Or if you want to type in a question in the Q&A box, feel free to do so. So Jay Dawson asks, how are the impacts weighed in a final decision, environmentally versus financial? Does one outweigh the other? Rob, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, we can't really answer it. It's going to come down to what happens in that formal proceeding and the proposed decision written by the administrative law judge. So how one outweighs the other, it's really impossible for us to say at this point. We just focus on the environmental side, complete our environmental review, and how that's incorporated into the decision is going to be up to those decision makers.
Stephen asks, so the 5:30 presentation will also be recorded as it will have different attendees and as such will both be indicated on the website. Yes, the 5:30 presentation is going to be recorded. We're going to do everything that we can to upload this presentation to the CPUC's YouTube channel and also to the project website. I I don't know how long it's going to take for us to do that. We're kind of, this is all new. It's very new for me doing a public meeting like this using Zoom. I didn't even know how to use Zoom a few months ago, and now I'm hosting a meeting. So we're trying to learn all the technical aspects of this, but I can tell you it is being recorded. There's going to be a gigantic MP4 file saved of this meeting, as well as the 5:30 meeting. And then where we go from there, you know, we're going to do the best that we can to get these files up on the website and YouTube. That's our dream, our hopes, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think, Tom, that's the key thing to say is how quickly will the recording be made available? It's our intent to make it available. My understanding is we have a link on our project website, which I put in the chat. And that link will take you to the Public Utilities Commission's YouTube channel. So we do have a YouTube channel, and that's where you'd be able to view it in the future. But how quickly that will happen is unclear. We do have the slides available immediately, and then ultimately, I think we'll be transcribing this and this meeting to some extent as well, and providing that written information in our environmental impact report. So the recording, a transcription, the slides, that's our plan.
Okay. Maybell says, thank you for your presentation. Will the recording be available later? I think hopefully, as Rob just said, there has been so much information, Mabel says, so thanks. Monty says, my address, and I'm not going to read it out loud, but gives an address. Is this power line, will this power line have an impact on my property? I don't know off the top of my head on this, but what I would suggest that you could do is type your address into the interactive web map, which is on, we talked about it in the presentation. There's a link to that web map on the project website. And you can look at where your property is with respect to either the proposed project or proposed project components or variations on the proposed project or any of the alternatives. Laura says the proposed blue lines end at the city limits. We live just north of that. Does the Welsona route impact the section north of the city limits, and how? Not sure I understand. I don't know if I understand. So the proposed blue lines. Rob, do you have any insight on this particular one?
Yeah, I was just thinking I might Google Welsona. I'm not sure which route that is. Patrick?
Oh, so Steven says the Welsona route is part of the Estrella route. Oh, okay. So you're talking about, it looks like possibly talking about the Estrella route. And if we're all using the right terminology, the Estrella route is what we also call the northern route. So the route that goes far to the north and then cuts across west to the existing 70 kV line.
Maybe go to the map slide as just a slide to leave it on.
Okay, let me hang on. I guess I'm a little confused because she mentioned blue lines, which makes me think it's the proposed project alignment, the Union Road route. Not sure. if I
It may
understand.
refer to that intersection and just north of the intersection where it then turns green and part of Estrella.
Oh. Okay, I just have to say that all I can say is that that the description of the impact should be included in the draft DIR. I'm not. Another person, Eric, says Welsona Road is your northernmost green and yellow lines. Oh, okay, all right. So we did look at the impacts of the northern route, this Estrella route. That's the green and yellow lines here you see. And so you can look in chapter 4, and again, chapter 4 is split up into 20 sections from aesthetics to wildfire. And you can look at this alternative combination, which is essentially alternative combination number 1. I'm sorry, it's alternative combination number 2, and look at the discussion of the Estrella route.
So Tom, I just went to the web map, which is in the chat, and you can find a link to that on our project website as well. And I typed in Welsona Road, and it zooms into it. So it looks like Welsona Road is a bit of a continuation of the Estrella Road once it crosses the river there.
I see it. I see it right.
But that might be helpful for these kinds of questions to see just how close you are to an alternative. Would be to go to this web map and type in an address or a road, and then you'll be able to answer that question.
Yeah, sorry about that. I see Welsona Road listed right there on the figure. We just have always called this Estrella. Let me is it too late to consider additional undergrounding? You can certainly provide a comment letter about additional undergrounding. Anything's game in comment letters on the draft DIR. Thanks to all the other people who've been helping me typing in additional information in the Q&A. I appreciate that. Laura says, if EMRs aren't considered in the EIR, when and where are they considered? Your lines are literally adjacent to our house on River Road. EMRs. I'm not sure I understand what an EMR refers to. Oh, EMF. Okay, she clarified EMF. Rob, did you want to talk any more about the EMF? I mean, we discussed it in the Sequa document up front.
Right, and as Tom said earlier, it's not part of the environmental analysis, but there are measures taken to reduce EMF, and it is true that the literature is not conclusive on what the effects may be one way or the other. So there are some measures taken, but it's not part of our environmental review.
Right. Q&A is, there's nothing in the Q&A. I don't believe anybody's got, oh, somebody's got their hand raised. Oh, that's Laura. Sorry, Laura, I didn't see your hand raised. Did you want to, I'm going to allow you to talk, Laura, if you'd like. I'm going to unmute you right now. If you'd prefer not to talk, you can type in the Q&A. Hi,
Hello,
Laura.
Tom, can you hear? Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, we are exactly on North River Road, just north of the city limits. And we have huge, huge power lines going right adjacent to our property. So I have several questions. First of all, if you did the route that goes up along Estrella Road, are you going to be increasing the power lines that go up and down North River Road? That's question one. Question two.
Okay, let's stop at that one for a second. So River Road, I want to make sure I know where.
You aren't from here, are you?
No, I'm not. Sorry. So you're not talking about South River Road. You're talking about.
No, we're talking North River Road, just north of the city limits. And
Okay.
it goes from here to San Miguel.
Okay.
Or to Wellsona Road.
All right. So what, looking at the figure here, which I've brought up on the screen, hopefully everybody can see it, is that this would involve a new power line that would go along this route right here and then connect to the existing 70 kV line.
Would that be increased, enlarged?
Would
heightened?
would this north-south be increased?
Yes.
It wouldn't be increased. Basically what it is sort of there is a new line here that would go along this existing alignment. It would be basically sort of a sorry. We have I don't know if I would call it increased. I mean, this whole line here does need a little help. There are some poles that, the project proponents have, advocated replacing some poles along here and just sort of reconductoring this line segment here that basically puts in new lines that are a little bit higher quality than the ones that are there right now.
I was told at one time those were going to be increased in height by about 12 feet by PG&E.
By PG&E.
Is that still a consideration?
I don't know if they're going to be raised that much. I didn't think the poles were going to change that much. Patrick, do you have insight on that?
That segment, the north-south portion there is reconductoring / replacement. And I think the pole heights could increase a little bit. That is all in chapter 2 and chapter 3.
So you can't give me an answer as to what that height would be?
Off the top of my head, no. I have to go back to the AR, but it's not a substantial height increase. 12 feet is more than I had heard.
Okay, well, that's what PG&E told me. And then I've been asking if the EMFs, since this is, I mean, literally a stone's throw from my house, if EMFs are not in the environmental impact report, where do I deal with them and how do I deal with them? Because as you have said, they could be a factor, but you're not thinking about it and considering it. And I have real concerns about that. Especially
the best we can do today, Laura, is refer you to chapter 2.9.
Good Lord, could you just answer my question though? I mean, can you guys answer that? Where is it done? Who reviews that?
Well, the analysis was done prior to our environmental impact report. I mean, there's that research on EMFs has been conducted separately from us, and the policy has been established. And under Sequa, we don't look at EMFs, and we do describe the approaches taken to minimizing EMFs in chapter 2.9. But that's about as good as we can explain today.
Okay, so if I have specific questions other than the email address that I've received, that I need to speak to somebody specifically, who would that person be?
With respect to which topic? EMF?
Well, I also asked you about the power lines going through. I didn't get an answer on that. I didn't get an answer on EMFs. I'm not sure about what the upgrade would look like on North River Road because I don't think my questions are being answered. So maybe I need to talk to somebody more specifically, have them come take a look at the situation.
Well,
Yeah, I
the
mean,
best, we are trying to steer comments to written format. That's ideal, and we'll capture this today as well. But to get a written response, the best way to do it is to send us an email and with your specific concerns.
Okay, and my final question is, why aren't we being more forward thinking and just going underground altogether? I mean, that's the way of the future. These overhead lines are ridiculous.
Well, we did consider undergrounding in specific areas, but it is has not been considered in all areas of the project. And I guess I didn't know how to respond. I'm not sure that undergrounding is the way of the future or not, but we did consider it in specific areas.
Okay, I've got a lot of questions. I'm sorry that we couldn't get further into it, but I appreciate your time.
yeah, and I want to apologize. I mean, there's a lot of complexity to the project, and a lot of people went into writing the document, and so we, I always want to say we may not have the answers readily available, but certainly if you submit these comments to the email site, we can respond to them in writing in the final EIR. Okay. Q&A. Marge writes, I would like to obtain a copy of slides used in today's presentation. Where can I obtain these? They're actually available right now if you go to the project website. And again, you may have to refresh that page because it was updated today. Sometimes internet browsers don't automatically give you like the most recent version of a website. You have to refresh it. But if you scroll down or if you just at the very top, you'll see if you're interested in, it says something like if you're interested in the draft EIR and public meetings, click here. It'll take you down to the draft EIR and public meetings section of the page. And there's a link, it'll say if you want it, the project presentation slides are available by clicking here, and you just click on the word here. And that should give you the slides to the presentation. RP says, I would like someone to visit my home to see how this ridiculous line will impact my view. How will this be arranged? And Laura says,
I mean, in short, I don't know off the top of my head how that would be arranged, but that's a comment we wouldn't mind getting in writing.
And also Stephen Baker notes pole heights indicate to be raised to 105 feet. We'll look into all of that. RP says, I will send it to the email address. Thanks. Well, that's great. Thank you, RP. Q&A is empty right now. I'm not seeing any hands raised. So again, if anybody has any question, feel free to type it in the Q&A box or raise your hand to speak. Right now, we don't have anything. Okay, Stephen is asked to speak, so I'm gonna unmute you, Stephen, right now.
Yeah, Tom, there was a question that didn't get answered by RP. Who does Patrick Donaldson work for?
Oh, I thought I had answered that, but maybe I didn't. I apologize. Patrick Donaldson works for Horizon Water and Environment, which is the company that I work for.
Thank you.
Sure. No questions. Nobody's raising their hand. So again, we're going to have another. Oh, we have a question. Will all emails sent to the project email address be answered? Yes, they will be, provided that the comments on the proposed project or the alternatives. We will provide written responses to those comments in the final EIR. That was from RP. Lacey says, she says this may have already been addressed, but how closely are the alternatives being looked at and considered? What will be the determining factors? Rob did address that a little bit, that essentially there's going to be another process here, the legal proceeding process that involves the parties to the legal proceeding, the administrative law judge, and then, ultimately the CPUC commissioners themselves, and how they weigh different things. I can't speak to. All I can speak to is how things were weighed or addressed in the EIR. But I guess the short answer is I don't know how the judge and the CPUC commissioners will look at these, or what will be the determining factors. RP says, can you talk more about the formal proceeding? Will the public be able to participate? Rob, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I was just going to type in the website for the formal proceeding. It's a bit of an ugly URL. I'll put it in the chat as well. But you essentially, using that proceeding number A1701023, you can see the documents, which includes rulings and decisions, motions to become a party to the proceeding. All of that is located at the proceeding website, which is separate from the website for the Sequa review. And so to get more information about what's happening in the proceeding, you would go there. Typically, you have legal teams and parties such as the applicants or the the Office of Public Advocates, Public Advocates Office participate. And sometimes you'll get municipalities or counties will participate, sometimes not. But it's generally not, generally individual members of the public generally don't participate, but it doesn't mean you can't. And so we do have information about how to become a party to the proceeding that we can send you. That'd be easiest to accomplish by email. We do have a website with those steps. But it's generally a fairly, courtroom setting and a legal proceeding that takes place. And it's quite a big undertaking, often for individual residents.
So again, we will be having another one of these meetings. It's going to contain the same slides. It's maybe different Q&A because there may be different people attending the later meeting today, but that one starts at 5:30. It has a different Zoom link than this meeting did. And so make sure that if you do want to join the 5:30 public meeting, be sure to go either however you got this link, make sure that you use the link for the 5:30 meeting and not for the noon meeting.
I'm just going to add to the chat as well. There's the Public Advisor's Office. And for feedback on how to become a party to that proceeding, that's a good place to go. There's a link on this page I'll chat out that is Becoming a Party. That'll give you more information about a better answer to the question from
RP says, for the next meeting this evening, may I suggest that the presenters have the interactive web map handy to type in the locations being asked about in the Q&A. That way you can provide better answers. I thought about that, RP, actually, in advance of this meeting. The one thing I want to be careful about is because this meeting is being recorded, I want to be very careful that I'm not disclosing individuals' home addresses in a public meeting, and in particular the location of the homes, people's homes, in something that would be uploaded and become a public document. RP says Cali Paso Winery is a public place. Okay, I will look that up before the next meeting. I just want to, in a general sense, I want to, I don't want to get into a situation where we've opened up the interactive web map online and we have people typing in their home addresses and things like that. I understand, RP. I understand. Stephen Baker, Tom, what was the final attendee count for the 1:30? I think what you mean is the for this meeting. I know that we've got 26 attendees right now. Julie, I don't know if that number was higher at some point. It seems like it was. I feel like it was up into 30s at one point.
Yeah, I believe we had up to 43 participants, which includes panelists.
Okay, great. if, you know, one thing I do want to mention is that if somebody is having problems using the interactive web map, feel free to send an email to the project email address, estrellaproject@horizonh2o.com, and just say that you need some help. And if you could, you know, provide a phone number, I'm probably going to be the person who calls you back. But just let me know how I can contact you. I have received some calls already that people have called. There is a phone number for this project site and where you can leave messages. Sometimes people don't indicate how I can get back to them. I mean, I've got their phone number that they used for making the call, but sometimes those phone numbers are not the number that they want to be reached by. So if you just make sure that you give me information of how I can reach you, how I can get back with you, that would be great.
Hi, I just want to make a correction that we actually had between 40 and 50 with panelists. So there's been more attendees that were added later.
Oh, good.
Numbers, yeah.
Great. We may have more at the 5:31. So we were expecting maybe the attendance to be a little bit lower for this noon one and the higher attendance for the 5:30, but we'll see. And I also just want to, you know, thank everyone for being patient. And this is new to me. This whole Zoom thing is new to me. I'm not used to doing this. And so it's been a little clunky, but we're just sort of doing the best we can under the circumstances. And again, we'll have another run at this at 5:30. But Lacey says, what factors drove the alternative combinations? Was this driven by public feedback, environmental impacts, et cetera, or combinations, specifically area number 1 and number 2 near North Golden Hill? A lot of factors went into coming up with these alternative combinations. When we did our scoping meeting a few years ago down in Paso at the school, we got a lot of input. I think there were about 80 people that showed up at the school that evening for the public meeting. We heard a lot of comments, and some of those comments were considered during the preparation of the EIR, and you know, did give us ideas for potential combinations. Some alternative combinations were developed by the CPUC Sequa team, which includes Rob, other folks at CPUC, people at Horizon, people in the bigger Horizon team. We have various experts who are on our team, people who are expert in power engineering, electrical distribution, transmission engineering. We have biologists, cultural resources people, all sorts of people who are involved in looking at the lay of the land out there and figuring out what are some potential alternatives that, you know, potentially make sense. And some of them ultimately didn't make sense and they were dismissed, and we explained why they were dismissed. Some did make sense and we carried them through. The area number 1 and number 2 near North Golden Hill Road, I'm guessing I think maybe by area number 1 and area number 2, I'm guessing as far as the undergrounding goes, you know, we have two different undergrounding alignments that go along Wisteria and Golden Hill Road. Coming up with those different undergrounding alignments did involve we heard some feedback from people that live up in that area. And so some of that feedback was incorporated into developing these undergrounding alternatives. the actual alignment itself, that was proposed by PG&E. Okay. So we're almost out of time. Looks like we've sort of run out of Q&A. We still have time for one if somebody has it. But if not, and you want more, we'll be back at 5:30 again using a different Zoom link and call and dial in information and all of that. We have a question from Lacey. Has the city of Paso Robles continued to engage in the process? Yes, they have. I don't know, Rob, if you want to add anything to that. But yes, we've been, the team, CPUC, the team has been engaged with the city all along.
And I would expect they would have some comments on the draft EAR and we'd reach out to them. But yeah, we've engaged with the city. Yep. But
I don't want to imply that the city, because we've been engaged with them, agrees with everything in this draft EIR. I don't want to imply that this is not the city's EIR, but we've certainly been engaged with the city all along. Thanks, Lacey. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any comments or hands. Again, thanks everybody. Appreciate your involvement. It's great to get a lot of participation. I'm glad this worked. We had a pretty decent turnout here. My biggest fear was there'd be no participants. That was we didn't. We had a great turnout, so that was really good. And again, if you want to attend to 5:30, you're certainly more than willing and welcome to do that. And as I said, we will try our best to figure out how to do this whole technology thing with the recorded videos of these presentations. And the slides, though, are available right now on the website, the project website. And if you have any questions, feel free to send your questions to Estrella Project at horizonh2o.com. We try to get back to you as soon as possible with responses. I usually can get back within a matter of a few hours with responses. So yeah. Great, and hope everyone has a safe and healthy and happy holiday season. And take care. The comment period is open again until February 1st. So still plenty of time to provide written comments. Again, send those to Estrella Project at Horizon H2O, and we will provide written responses to those comments in the final EIR. So with that, thanks very much. And we'll take a break here and get ready for our 5:30 meeting. So take care, everybody.